Yes, please don't record anything, because most of the stuff you see on this panel we stole. So, record. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this panel, to our Brands Gone Geek panel. We did a similar panel last year where we talked a bit about how brands, both endemic, close into our pop culture universe, and those that are a bit further out, are paying more and more attention to our consumer, to you guys, to the Superfan, and how they're doing that, and how some are doing it in a very interesting, intelligent, thoughtful manner, and how some are just looking for quick tie-ins. We're going to talk a little bit today about the marketplace and about what some of the trends that we see, but let me introduce the members of the panel. First up, we have Ed Catto, my partner at Bonfire Agency. Bonfire Agency, as far as we know, I'm not sure we're the only one. We're sort of the first marketing consultancy, strategic marketing agency devoted exclusively to helping brands make inroads with superfans, pop culture consumers. We describe ourselves to people who don't have any idea of this universe as we're an ethnic agency for nerds. So we basically view our consumer, where all of us are these consumers and superfans, as their own ethnicity, as their own demographic group. And just as you have organizations that help brands navigate messaging to Asian communities, to Hispanic communities, to African American communities, to gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender communities. We believe that we have an affinity amongst ourselves, very, very passionate group, very, very influential group of people, but a demographic that needs to be spoken to and needs to be addressed. Specific rules, ways to do it and ways not to do it. So that's where Bonfire exists. Next up, Car D'Angelo, who is a comic book retailer. Earth 2 Comics in Sherman Oaks and in Northridge. Bio Comics there. And other stuff. Corey, how long have you been doing that?
We opened the first store 11 years ago, so 2003, is that one? Yeah.
And before that, you were with Universal?
At one time I was with Universal Studios for a long time, and independent producing for Happy Madison and other companies.
Kris Longo, who is president of Geek Riot Media. Kris is also operative at Bonfire, and Geek Riot Media was sort of recently spun off from Bonfire. It is a media company that offers advertisers opportunities to advertise in comics. We aggregated the leading independent publishers, anybody except Marvel and DC, into one group. So we've been seeing more ads in comics recently. It's because of the work of Kris, and as well as some of the affinity sites such as Hero Complex and Denim Geek, and I'm probably missing a few. Yeah, I'm missing a few. Heidi MacDonald, a journalist. Heidi is also, I'll embarrass her. Heidi is responsible. Without Heidi, there'd be no Why the Last Man. That's all I'm going to say about that. And so we're eternally grateful for Heidi. For those of you who read her column, we know sort of the insight that's offered there. And Heidi, for those that don't, you want to give the website real quick?
The Beat at comicsbeat.com. And Publishers Weekly as well.
Filip Sablik of Boom Studios, who's not here. He is the newly appointed president and is just too damn good for us now. Newly appointed publisher, excuse me, in charge of marketing. Filip's a great guy, I'm sure he might pop in a little bit. Rob Salkowitz, author and marketing consultant. I'm going to mangle the name, Rob, so give me the full name of your book.
Oh, Comic-Con and the Business of Pop Culture.
And the Business of Pop Culture. He's also a contributor to ICB2 and a number of other websites, and has been really the last 2 or 3 years really gotten under the underbelly, under the hood of comic culture, particularly at conventions. And we'll have some interesting data to report in a couple of minutes. Mel Wilson, who is the head strategist at Interpublic Group of Companies Media Lab in New York, focusing on digital innovations. And one thing that's also very true about this demographic is that we are early adopters. You are all early adopters of technology and completely socially engaged as it relates to that. And I'm Steve Rotterdam. I'm also the other co-founder and partner in Bonfire Agency. Okay, so we're going to what we'll do is we're going to present some little bits of data, some of the findings that we produced, and understand too that what you're going to see in the dialogue that we're going to have initially. This is what we tell advertisers, potential brands, potential brand partners. These are folks who don't have a vested interest yet in our community. So in some cases it's very elemental, very basic. In some cases you might disagree with some of this stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this is how we portray the demo to the audiences, to those audiences. First of all, to know that when it comes to our universe, there are many of us. There are about 5 million comic book and graphic novel consumers that run through the direct market on a monthly basis. It's actually probably a little bit more these days. This is the stats about 2 years old. Those are not all 5 million of them, but there's some of them, and they're all very happy. And this is from Flying Colors Comics in Concord, California. They are multiplying, like bunnies, and it's growing. And the other thing is that we're very, very evangelical. When we're passionate about something, we love to share that information and bring others over to our side of things. Interesting fact about this demographic from the buying power. A survey that we did amongst members of FanPan, which is our pop culture consumer panel that we run, that you're all invited to sign up for, and we'll have a QR code at the end of this presentation. The average consumer spends about $1,100 a year versus an annual spend of $725 among sports fans. So we're very, very sad sports fans. And this, I think it's justice for the wedgies when I was 5th grade. We're growing. And we're learning how to use the edit equipment. There's about $1.3 billion spent annually on comic books, graphic novels, pop culture collectibles, toys, games, apparel, and other stuff through the direct channel. Now you'll see figures, and you may have seen some recent figures estimating that a comic book and graphic novel market is about 875 million. That's certainly the case, or at least the best estimate. We've taken numbers from NPD and have added them from other categories to come up with this aggregate figure. It is about 18% more than it was last year. There's about 18% growth in comics and graphic novel sales through various channels, not just the direct market, between now and last year. So a lot of things are happening. Everything is on an upswing all over the place. Believe it or not, we're more diverse than people sometimes give us credit for. Let me go back to just focus on that first stat. We are 60-40 male-female in general. That's an estimate. A lot of people have done work on Facebook and have tried to make that connection. Female component of our readership and purchasing pattern is growing. You should understand, when we talk to brands about this marketplace, a lot of them are having trouble. Here comes Filip Sablik, everybody. A lot of them, there's been talk for the last few years of the elusive male target. Males in our demo, 18 to 34, our primary demo, are difficult to reach. We present this universe and opportunities to underwrite and sponsor and engage with this audience as ways to reach that otherwise preoccupied demand. Women in the category are just as preoccupied, but there are other ways in which to reach them. We are hopeful and advocate as much as we can for brands to reach out to women through for this particular channel as opposed to other channels that are available to them. So again, when I say it's arguable, there's nothing we love more in this demo than to argue. Ethnicity, common readership over-indexes amongst African American and Hispanics. You should know that because that also indicates, provides opportunities for some brands who've targeted those ethnicities. Geography is spreading, as some of you have experienced this, with explosive growth in the size, significance, and success of the regional conventions. It used to be everybody wanted to come to San Diego, and everybody still wants to come to San Diego. But it's kind of tough to get a ticket these days, some days you may have experienced. There's some really, really, really great shows in Seattle, and in Baltimore, and in New York, and in Chicago, and a huge one in Salt Lake City, and Orlando. These regional conventions, which were at one point just comic dealer shows, are growing in importance and significance to the entire community. And so people are saying, no, I don't need to really sacrifice everything that I have to camp out for tickets in Copley Plaza. I can go to my show in Charlotte at Heroes Con and have a great time and see the talent that I want to see there as well. So conventions are expanding. I think Rob has some data to corroborate that. I'll throw over to him in a second. Comic shops themselves are also growing. We say for every comic shop that goes out of business, it's the Hydra effect. 2 take its place. There is much wider range of merchandise. The stereotypical basic comic shop that sells only back issues and sells only recent comics or graphic novels has expanded. You can buy your urban vinyl there, you're buying your apparel there, you're buying your games there, you're buying a whole sort of pop culture accoutrements are there. And those stores that have diversified their product mix are actually stronger, better prepared to handle the vagaries of the economy that continue to perplex small business. And the creators, this is something that's also very interesting. Particularly recently, the creators are more representative, not completely representative, but more representative of the general population in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity, as well as political viewpoint. But there is much, much farther to go. And there's a lot more voice being given to this. And we think that's only good for the industry and for opportunities to exploit it with brands who want to sell you things. Okay. Our audience is wired. We call them tribe-wired. And just some of the things that, these are the things last year in our universe that broke the internet. Ben Affleck's Batman image, the new Doctor Who, the Ozymandias episode of Breaking Bad, Sharknado. We weren't exclusive on that. The first casting call for Star Wars. The teaser to the trailer to X-Men, the latest X-Men movie. Trailers themselves are now getting trailers, which is fascinating. All these points of engagement are opportunities for brands to engage. LeVar Burton's Kickstarter campaign. Very, very popular. He's one of us, and we'll claim him any way we can. A little story, just a few weeks ago, the fight to have a memorial made featuring Superman logo to honor a little boy who was murdered 10 years ago. That broke the internet. On a weekly basis, all the comics news that comes out there breaks the internet in our universe, whether it's the death of Archie, whether it's the new Thor, whether it's Sam Wilson as Captain America, whether it's talent changes. All these things generate continued engagement, continued chatter, continued debate on the internet. And of course, bunnies. The bunnies are always internet. Influence. As I've indicated, I mentioned we directly account for $1.3 billion in comics and all that cool stuff, but this audience directly influences major trends accounting for billions more in movies, television, gaming, music, fashion, technology, even food. Case in point, we did this last year, but we're doing a little bit different this year. These are the top 50 movies in box office sales of all time globally. Okay? Let's get rid of some that we know don't belong. We'll get rid of Titanic. Right? We'll get rid of Inception. We love Kris Longo, but it's really not based on anything in our universe. It's all the original, so we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of Fast and Furious 6. Let's get rid of all the cartoons and all the animated ones, whether, just to be safe. And then let's get rid of the Twilight movie. 37 of the top 50 films of all time globally are movies that have their origin, development, some sort of foothold in our universe. If we were to do this domestically, you would see similar trends. We would lose Titanic. We would lose The Passion of the Christ. No offense, it's just not necessarily, unless you want to go back to some of the maybe Crumb's work. We would lose Forrest Gump. Let's get rid of all the cartoons. Let's get rid of those Twilight movies. So we have 38 of the top 50 nationwide, domestically. If you look at last year, just last year's sales alone, 19 of the 50 highest grossing movies of 2013 were our movies. That represents 35% of the total domestic box office. That's why marketers want to talk to you. And that's why they want to understand you and they want to learn how to talk to you. Okay. I'm going to throw that a little bit over to Rob now, who's going to follow up on some data that he presented in an earlier panel regarding convention attendees.
Sure, thanks, Steve. Over the last couple of months, I've been working with Eventbrite, the online ticketing platform. They have been watching the fandom event space very closely for the last few years. And what they saw is that this kind of stuff, comic conventions, video games, anime, specialty fandom, as a category, is outperforming a lot of the other categories of events that they specialize in terms of sporting events and music and wine festivals and things like that, to the tune of triple-digit year-over-year growth since 2011. Just some really staggering numbers. And in fact, they did a market sizing survey last year where they figured that of nearly 1,000 fan events that took place in North America generated somewhere around $600 million in gross ticket sales alone. To put that in perspective, the entire comics publishing industry has been sized at about $875, all of it. That's periodicals, trades, digital. So the joke about the people coming to conventions outnumber people reading comics is almost true on a dollar basis. When you calculate the total economic impact of conventions and fandom events is probably in the billions right now. So to figure out where all of that energy is coming from, because I think a lot of this fan demographic and a lot of this momentum that you guys track is generated at live events like this. This is where the community manifests. This is where people, cross-pollinate, and the people that are interested in one set of stuff meet the people who are interested in other sets of stuff. You get exposed to your favorite characters on different media platforms. You go away fans of something new and go out and tell your friends about it. That's what happens here at these shows. So Eventbrite wanted to find out who was coming to these events, what they think, what they spend on. And so we surveyed, and we got back over 2,600 person response on this survey. So good numbers, and some very interesting stuff that we found. First of all, we think of fans as fans of a particular thing, and that if you're a comics fan, maybe you're not so into video games, maybe you're not so into anime, horror, some of these specialty genres. Actually not true. When given an opportunity to identify as a super fan of up to 9 different genres, the average respondent on the survey identified as a super fan of more than 3. And the highest affinities were things like movies and TV and horror and science fiction and stuff like that. These are the things that are the glue that binds together the video gamers and bronies and all of these other fandoms out there. So that was kind of interesting, the idea that all of the investments that big media companies are making to try and get you from one platform to another are starting to pay off. People are becoming fans of everything. In my opinion, the most noteworthy thing we got out of the survey is how the results broke down. So we issued a survey to people that had purchased a ticket to a fan event from Eventbrite over the last 2 years. So it's self-selected people, but it was a pretty broad number. Aggregate gender breakdown was 55 male, 45 female, consistent with some of the stuff that we've seen. Cut that number by over 30, under 30. Over 30 is 65, 35, under 30, 50, 50. So the future of fandom is gender equal. That's borne out by this survey data. Now, do female fans spend differently? Are they coming to conventions and not spending as much? No. The number one response in our survey of what people like to do at conventions is buy stuff, 70%. Across all categories. Next was meet celebrities. Next was meet celebrities, that was 53%. Everybody comes to cons to meet people. Some people come to cons pursuing romance. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. But the spending, we had our income distribution breaks down pretty well as a proxy for general income in the United States. And like your numbers, we're seeing about $100 to $500 spent on the convention equals $100 to $500 at the physical retail and online. So people who are walking the floor spending money are spending money at stores and they're spending money online. And actually, the more they spend in one channel, the more they're likely to spend in another channel. So there's all kinds of fascinating stuff out there. You can actually go to eventbrite.com, WAC fans, and there's a big infographic and there's a 3-page report that gets into some of these numbers. But it's a really interesting stuff. And if you believe that cons are where the action is, and if you're thinking about organizing a con, take a look at some of these numbers because it's really fascinating, some of the attitudes and the other stuff.
One of the points I want to come back to, I'm going to show you some examples of some work here, but I want to talk about, is the fandom, is super fandom, is our demo becoming more mainstream, is mainstream becoming more a reflection of that? And what are the implications of that? We've always said, we establish ourselves as an agency that navigates through these geek-infested waters, but if everybody can start swimming that particular stroke, then, I need to get into the shower. So I do want to come back to that. We're going to just show you very quickly before we open it up for some more discussion. Some examples of aspects of campaigns where brands, again, not endemic, not necessarily tied to our universe, have tied in. Some of these are tie-ins, and when we talk about tie-ins, there's a big movie coming up, and here's an opportunity for Lysol or for Cheerios to tie in. What the movie studios want is they want real estate, they want to get your logo on those packages. What the companies want is to have a sales boost, especially for retailers. We're going to show you an example of one that was done. This is 2 years old. It's one of the best ones we've seen, and we continually come back to it. Let's take a look. What a great integration. Again, you got to know that there's someone on that creative team who's a fan of Captain America, a fan of comics, and you're seeing more and more of that as well. more of the creative people, whether they be at studios, whether they be at the networks, whether they be at ad agencies, are coming from our universe, and they're reflecting that in what they're producing. But there are exceptions, and we're going to show you one of those right now. I'll show you one. Thank you.
Eat like you mean it. The Western Extra Bacon Thick Burger at Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. See X-Men Days of Future Past in theaters May 23rd. Want to join the X-Men? Unleash your extraordinary hunger on Instagram. Take a bite of the Western Extra Bacon Cheeseburger or any other Carl's Jr. or Hardee's burger. Hashtag Eat Like You Mean It, and you might get an X-Men makeover.
We'll skip the next one, but notice, that is your traditional quick service restaurant, fast food restaurant tie-in with the movie property. Eat Like You Mean It is Hardee's tagline. It has nothing to do with the X-Men. There was a little bit of behind the scenes online as well, also sponsored by Hardee's, where one of the creative directors said, "Well, when you have a superhero-sized hunger, this is what the Hardee's extreme is what you go for." How many of us have had that superhero-sized hunger? And is it the X-Men that will do it, or is it Spider-Man, or is it Batman, or is it Superman? It could be any particular superhero. There was no integration here from our perspective whatsoever. It's a missed opportunity. Also, that wasn't Jennifer Lawrence, because you can be sure she's not doing commercials now. The young man in the Quicksilver spot, they did one with Colossus as well, is the actor from the particular film. But again, it was quick in, easy out. What did Fox get out of it? God bless the people at Fox. They got exposure. They got exposure in the restaurant as well. But when the movie opened up, that weekend, the weekend it opened up, this was forgotten by them. And Hardee's, their same-day sales expanded from the year before. They were very happy with it. But as a fan, many of you seeing that want to rush out to get an extreme burger, because we know you want those enchiladas, right? Okay, we're going to skip the next one real fast. To move to another good
cannot let the fans down. Don't worry. The United States Postal Service will get it there on time with priority mail flat rate shipping.
Our priority has always been saving the day, because our priority
Amazing!
is you. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, delivered by the United States Postal Service.
marvelous integration. Those trucks are still roaming the country with Spider-Man emblazoned all over it. Ed ran out and got all the size of the priority mail packaging, which we now have implanted in our storage. You don't even need to, it doesn't even mention Stan's name. You don't even need to. It delivers on point from the U.S. Postal Service, and fans running into post offices to rip off boxes, which is one that Stan's maybe is a good thing. But again, a sensitive, well done, well thought out integration. Real quick, this is a program that's running right now. The Crush sodas, which are the fruit-flavored sodas, which interestingly enough, fruit-flavored sodas over-index with African Americans and Hispanics, is tied in with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming up. This is a little mobile version of the site, where they're using the shell pattern along the top, but also kind of playing off the idea of urban engagement. And did it very, very well. Some of the language, obviously, all the cans feature various turtle patterns with different favorite of each of the different turtles. Crush a bugga, okay, that's a great way to take that trope and make it something. And they invite people to take photos of themselves doing various Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stunts for a contest. But again, very simple program, but a very well executed, we thought, tie-in that it will be over just like the Hardee's program, but definitely elevate the presence of that particular brand, which is a strident, which is not a leading brand in that category. They go up against the Sunkist brand, but gives them a little bit of competitive edge. Some work that we did, this is one of our programs with Guinness. Guinness came to us and wanted to reach out appropriately. Spirits are a great area of opportunity to tie in with our consumers, certainly with our creators, who most of them are fans of this particular product. So we said there are ways to do it, and there are ways that would be somewhat disingenuous, that might reflect poorly on the industry, and sort of also reflect poorly on the brand. We tied them in with the Baltimore Comic-Con and sponsoring the Harvey Awards, which recognize all the craftsmen in various categories. So what better brand than Guinness, which is all about the craft, which has a storytelling background to align with it. A very simple program that was also so literally you have Bill Willingham holding the glass with the logo out. It was like the big coup as he was saluting them. And it's also a great thing when within our community when a brand like Guinness, as opposed to some of the craft brands that we're all kind of familiar with in public conventions, recognizes the importance of this community. It validates a lot of folks within and without. This was a great, just happened on the way to the airport. Now, most folks would see that and go, okay, well, maybe some folks will go there and say, yeah, they were the first light beer. But you can be sure that Star Wars fans veered off the road and got into the past. But they're great, smart, without being overbearing. And they probably had to pay nothing for this, which I'm sure really upset Disney. So those are examples of some brands, again, that have tied in with this is a little less, that tied in with specific properties. But I'm going to show you 3 spots real quick of brands that have really embraced our universe to introduce products, and we'll talk about them real quick. So I'm going to go through these in succession. First one is for Samsung.
With this miniature transmitter. All right. Yes. What time is it?
8:29.
Thank you. It's all right. This is 86 reporting under control. How's it going? An emergency situation.
Relay the information to headquarters.
Enterprise. Order shipment to the library records.
Jason, can you read me?
I read you.
This is Secret Agent Rob Salkowitz.
This vehicle is packed to close. Anything particular in mind? There's only one man who can get us out of here in time. I'll be down right away. I'm on my way.
We're on our way.
On my way.
On my way.
That was a nerd fest that produced that spot. You can just imagine what that session was like. I saw Johnny Sacco and his flying robot out there, and it's like, these are our people. They had it in a room, and they wouldn't let him out until they came out with this commercial. It was marvelous, again, opportunity just to play off the zeitgeist. Similarly, our friends at Apple did something last year, which we thought was kind of cool.
Guten Morgen!
Mr. Mojito. Okay, it's gonna be really fast. I've got 1 second.
No way.
Wait.
No, not bored.
I'm calling me.
No.
What?
That was a 30-second spot, the Klingons. The Klingons speaking Klingon. And what they were saying, actually, is Klingon. It's the traditional trope, it's like, bring me chocolate. Where are you, bring me chocolate? Shot in a comic shop. Cosplayers, totally validated in that particular spot. The 2 Japanese girls who were into, I don't know the terminology of that particular brand of obsession, but also featured very, very well in there. The last spot we're going to show you, which I think is the watershed spot. I'm sorry. Somebody take a look at my friends at Chase.
So you can get cash back on all your purchases. So you can use your cash back to follow your dream.
Why is that spot so significant? I'm going to show you four things real fast. First, we see our hero wearing a suit. Guy's got a job. He's in a comic shop. He goes over, he hands the comic to the somewhat maybe seasoned, cynical comic store clerk. Takes a look at it, gives him the knowing nod. Douche, I thought you were. Hey, now he takes care of himself. He's buying protein bars. Oh, gee, buying a lot of protein bars there. Okay, look at you. Okay, well, yeah, I'll give you the knowing nod too. Excellent. All right, he goes to see Cape Commander 3, much better than Cape Commander 2, and he's with his significant other who's not running in terror. She is there to see with him. Whoops. Oh, that's okay. No,
Your turn.
all right, so now he's home, right? He's got a home, he's got an apartment, and he lives with somebody. There's someone there reading the newspaper, okay? He's getting his cashback rewards, he goes to the convention, right? He's comfortable in his own skin. He walks in, a lot of cosplay here, guy helps and everything, and what happens at the very end? He gets the knowing nod. Yeah. That knowing nod speaks volumes. And again, and this is an example of one of those things where we have to wonder, have we become so mainstream? And will we continue to be? Let's hear it for our tech. I'm just going to throw this up there. If any of you want to join our fan panel, our consumer panel, that should work this year. That should fit. You can just click on that QR code. It's free. You can take surveys and get money. Guys, are we at the end of our moment in the sun? Are we now just as ubiquitous as sports fans or opera fans or fans of other sorts of obsessions? Don't raise your hand, just speak.
I'll take this one. I think you said it earlier in some of the comments where everything's becoming a fan-based behavior. So I think that the mainstream is actually coming back to what fans actually do, where you find a passion point, you really like it, you find ways to do more of it. I think that a lot of technology is becoming behavior-based, so it's a lot more personalized, it's a lot more about you. So that also leads towards fan-based activities, and brands are really looking for ways to interact with people in ways that they want to be interacted with. So that also leads towards fan-based behavior because there's no better ground for content as brands become publishers, some better than others, than fan bases. It's like fans know what they want. They know what they want to talk about. If you don't know how to talk to them, they'll actually instruct you how to talk to them. They'll show you how to be a natural part of the fan base. So I think that's why all the brands are kind of gravitating towards it. And I truly appreciate that you actually have one of my clients up there as a good example. So I'm happy about it.
Which one was that?
That would be Sony, Amazing Spider-Man.
Heidi, what do you see as far as, covering it from your vantage point? You every time something pop cultural or superhero lives on the radar?
I mean, it's very ubiquitous. And I mean, it's funny because I think you mentioned opera fans. I mean, I think there's, way more nerd fans than there are opera fans now. And, but I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, everybody knows opera, but I mean, like certainly comic book fans, I mean, it's just not weird anymore at all. And I mean, I think it's really like, when the Avengers was coming out, they did a great campaign with Dr. Pepper, with Coke. But Dr. Pepper had the Avengers on it, and I was at my Wayne Reed, which is the local New York drugstore, and the girl behind the counter is very fashionable, and she saw the the Avengers on. She says, "I can't wait to see that," And I mean, that's it. The girl at the drugstore had, without any self-consciousness whatsoever, was eager to share the fact that she liked the Avengers. the movie. And so, I mean, and to me, that's the perfectly natural. To me, in my, I have a website and I also work in the media, but it's way more unusual in my general life. Maybe it's just the people I hang out with, but it's very unusual that I find somebody who has word resistance, or it's very rare to hear them voicing their resistance.
Kris?
Yeah, I think Heidi's exactly right. Although from my point of view, in my job, I spend a lot of time meeting with people who make decisions on behalf of brands and where to allocate their budgets. And I try to convince them that you guys are the most powerful consumers and you should be considered for just about every kind of campaign. 10 years ago, the perception of you guys was that you did nothing but read comics 24/7. And I think now we're at a point where they recognize that you'll occasionally put down a comic and watch TV, and you'll go to movies. But beyond the entertainment categories, it's still a very difficult sell sometimes to convince them that you guys are the right customer. I think to your credit, you're a tough customer. You're intimidating, and sometimes that works against the messaging that reaches you guys. We've apparently convinced them that they drink beer, so we've made a little progress. Now when I go back to work on Monday, I can just go back to convincing them that you wear pants.
Yeah.
So some of our cosplayer friends notwithstanding, but
Well, they use the mail, so that's...
Right. And Filip, you've seen, I know that when you were at Top Cow, you were very involved in Wanted coming to the screen, and also very boom to bringing Two Guns to the screen, which is one of our top 50. Yeah, I noted that. Now, as full-on publisher, what do you think? And also with the relationship you have with Fox, and we didn't really get into television and what's happening there for the next few years. It seems that every property's either optioned or catch going into production. Are you seeing ways in which integration is occurring more naturally, or is it still forced?
I think on the media side, it's happening naturally because I think in general, movies in particular, they're looking for source material, whether it's from comic books or from novels, or any number of other sources. It's interesting to point out Inception, and that year. I think Inception was one of 2 studio films that was not based on a previously existing piece of intellectual property, and it's because it's really hard to create something original and market it and launch it when it's unbranded. And in the case of Inception, it's because you've got Christopher Nolan, who is basically telling his agent, I'll make the next Batman movie if they let me do this thing I'm really passionate about. In terms of, it's interesting because as a publisher, my viewpoint is that, I guess fandom and genre material is very much mainstream and very ubiquitous. The medium of comics, I think, still has quite a ways to go. At the end of the day, we have maybe 400,000 people that read comics on a regular basis, which is a very, 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 very small niche audience in the grand scheme of things. It's exciting that there's more attention, and I think, the CEO of Bill Ross Ritchie gave a keynote address at the Harvey's a couple years ago, and the crux of it was basically, hey, we've been at this tipping point before on a smaller scale, where the population at large is taking notice of these things we're passionate about, but there's an element of all of us that love this stuff and that end up making our careers about this stuff. There's an outsider mentality, and there's a part of all of us that is always going to be that kid in middle school that got made fun of or got picked on, or and this was our refuge, whether it's sci-fi, horror, or comic books, or whatever your particular flavor of fandom is. That was that safety zone. And so the question for all of us in the community, I think, and what Ross said was, we're being invited to sit at the big boys table. We're being invited to come be part of the larger pop culture conversation, which really influence it. And the question is, can we get over that part of us that doesn't want to sell out, that doesn't want the jocks to be in on the cool stuff that we know about? It's the thing with cool music, And I think that's a question we'll see will be answered, and that will be typically the transitionary point. If we can accept that we can now sit with the cool kids, can we be cool? Can we be cool, and can we make this cool?
If I could take a contrarian perspective on this, so in my book and my other work, I have this concept called peak geek, which is the moment when comics culture takes over pop culture, and a mountain has an upslope and a downslope. And 10 years ago, comics fans and fans in general were the elite because the entry costs to get into our subculture were so high. You had to know stuff like who drew this issue and where did this character come from in order to be considered authentic. And now that knowledge and a lot of that stuff is out in the public, and there's an inversion going on right now. Like I had an industry insider the other day, it says a great quote, he says, I've got everything that I always wanted when I was 12 years old. We've got, superhero movies coming out every weekend, we've got great comic conventions, we've got brands embracing our stuff, and now I just want it all to go away. And you know what? When that attitude starts to take hold, at the inside, and the elite becomes alienated from what's going on in the pop culture, which is our stuff, then we're on the backslope of peak geek, and that's when that snowball starts rolling down the hill. That's when we need to start.
It'll be interesting to see how all the television properties start to shake down.
Yeah, just real quick, I think there's another component to this, something that we focus on every day at Boom is. Our philosophy has always been, it's not that, the female demographic has been climbing over the years, and it's in a really amazing place right now. Our philosophy has been, it's not that, ladies weren't into this stuff, it's that nobody was publishing anything that they wanted to read. The prevailing kind of conventional thought for a while is that, those kids that read webcomics, they don't have any money to spend. They're not interested in coming into the space. They just want stuff for free. Well, as it turned out, from our experience, they just didn't want to buy the stuff you would publish. And if you publish something for them, they're perfectly happy to spend lots of money on it. So I think it's also about adjusting to the idea that there's not just one flavor, and that we can, as an industry and as a group, provide all sorts of different flavors of things.
I think that's, following on that, Philip, I was going to say, I think that's sort of the difference, because I think it is becoming mainstream in one sense, but I don't think the people involved think of themselves as mainstream. Because even when you look out on this room, and again, nothing against sports fans, but I feel like there are uniforms in sports. I mean, we have costumes, and I think that's sort of the difference, and there's sort of more of a diversity and more of an individuality, so everybody wants to kind of keep that, each of the fans wants to keep that as well. But it is mainstreaming in the sense that certainly like the comic book shop is sort of the equivalent of the sports bar. And that's that's the place where people can meet on a weekly or regular basis to have those discussions.
I think it's very important that brands understand it as much as anybody else as well. There are other ways, particularly brands that, and it's one of our missions as well to speak to brands about connecting with women through that. I just want to say, just to fill a speller head, Boom has made a tremendous commitment to women creators and new material for new audiences, and I think they would be commended for that.
Yeah, it's not a commitment, it's just
one other thing that we want to touch on too is that you also see with that ubiquity that kind of flip-flop of the social order. So in the old days, you would be the nerd, but now, I'm sure this happens to a lot of folks in this room, when there's a news story about, Thor is going to become a woman. Your social groups ask you, your mom or your neighbor or your coworker, so what do you think? You're the expert. In the old days, you were the weird guy who was completing your run of Spider-Man 15 years ago, or I was, and now you're the expert. So that flip-flop, I think, is kind of the very good side of this ubiquity, and it also speaks to how this crowd influences, the rest of society. It doesn't have to be opera guys.
But I think what is really important is that the change has come, and that comics fans, you said there was such a high entrance level because you had to participate in it very actively. And our culture has become far more participatory through social media. I mean, it's like now everything's very connected, there's maker culture. I mean, all of these things have really impacted fandom in a way. So, but I mean, they've come from fandom to the mainstream. Whereas everybody now, you know, if you rooted for your team, I mean, you did wear the t-shirt, you had the hat, you knew the statistics and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, that kind of participation has become widespread about, you know, Fargo or Breaking Bad, you know? I mean, even things that don't have a fantastic component.
We have time for one question. Real fast.
All right. Ran right up.
Some guys just get up. Okay.
It's on? All right. In 2009, NBC's Sci-Fi rebranded itself as Sippy, and explicitly said that they wanted to get away from the image of the nerdy science fiction fan. They wanted to go out and do other stuff, and they were leaving those guys behind. And I was shocked that that's what they said out loud. So I'd like to know what you guys think.
And we got Sharknado, right?
Funny thing is, those guys never left. Just like the new 52, we had tons of people go, that's it, I'm done, I'm finished, goodbye, I'll never have another DC product. 6 months later, you found it in your store going, yeah, check this out.
Right.
So because those sci-fi fans didn't leave, but more other people came to the party, it's a bigger world. Yeah, they also own it, yeah, so, yeah, I mean, there were some business aspects of it, well, but it's a brand, and you don't mess around with the brand. Okay, we have to stop, I'm sorry. But thank you all for coming. We're going to be hanging out for a few minutes. Keep on watching TV, and keep on buying products. Reward companies who do it right.